ora mai tātou, all of us. Kia ora. Nau mai, piki mai rā. Mauria mai o koutou ki tini whakaro. Me ngā āhuatanga o te rā. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou. I'd like to start. I'm Tim from Network Waitangi Whangārei. I'd like to start alongside my colleagues with a karakia by way of honouring the tangata whenua of this area and the tangata whenua of the motu. So tēnei te mihi atu. Ti he wini wini, ti he nako nako. Ka tau whatapapu I raro nei, ka tau whatarangi I tū nei. Ko ia roku hia manapo roto, ko ia roku hia manapo waho, ko ia roku hia manapo rarotonga. Pakatina kia tina, te mori hia waiki, e pupuana hoki, e wawana hoki, tā rewa tū ki te rangi, aua kia eke tangaro, eke pānuku, humi e, hui e, tai ki e. Tēnā koutou ngā karangatanga maha o te motu, o tēnei puta noa o tēnei rohe, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou te mana whenua, te mana motu hake o Aotearoa nei, tēnei te mihi atu. Acknowledge in a special way the tangata whenua of this country, those whose mana motu hake was established from way back, and in whose name and whose welcome we are here. So make my first acknowledgements to the tangata whenua, the iwi taketake o te motu, tēnei te mihi atu. And also acknowledge yourselves, each of you, that you've come tonight on a warm evening night in Whangārei to share with Avril and with each of us our ideas and our hopes for the treaty being made real in Aotearoa, in our time, in our place. So acknowledge you and welcome you. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Huri noa ki te whare, tēnā roa tātou katoa. Kia ora mai.
Ko te tiriti, ko te tiriti, te tiriti o Aotearoa. Ko te tiriti, ko te tiriti, te tiriti o Waitangi. Heki te kirunga, heki te kirunga. Motu hake, ranga tiratanga tuku iho. Ranga tiratanga tuku iho.
Kia ora mai tātou.
Kia ora,
Kia ora mai.
Kia ora Tim, e mihi pia koe mo tō karakia I tēnei pō, tēnei he mihi mai o hākia koe. Kia ora, tēnā koe, tēnā koe, tēnā koe. Kia ora everyone, I'm Ngaire. I'm not going to MC tonight's session. I'm going to hand that over to Sheryl very soon, but I'm just here to talk to you really briefly about Network Waitangi Whangārei. I'm a member of Network Waitangi Whangārei along with Tim and along with all these amazing people wearing the cool shirts, which you can get a link to if you want to buy one on our website. That's the merch pitch. But just to let you know about Network Waitangi Whangārei, we are a group of Pākehā treaty workers. We've been going since the early 90s. In fact, we started out of Project Waitangi when, hard to believe these days, the government actually funded Treaty of Waitangi education program. And that was Project Waitangi, and we became Network Waitangi. We have been providing treaty education for Pākehā, as I've said, for the last 30 years. We want to acknowledge our mentor, Reverend Joan Cook, who passed away quite a few years ago now, but one who championed Te Tiriti within Whangārei, and we're still blessed to have many of her peers as our members. So our intention for this series of 4 speakers over 4 weeks is to reach people just like yourselves. So ngā mihi, kia ora, thank you so much for coming. We really want to talk to people about how important Te Tiriti is and how that is the future for our country, and particularly in these times for us to work with other Pākehā to emphasise and to have a dialogue about the treaty and its meaningfulness for us all in Aotearoa. So check the notes. Yeah, that's me for this bit. I'm going to hand over to Sheryl Mai, who is probably really well known to many of you in the room, bringing the big guns tonight. So Sheryl was our mayor for 9 years, finishing her term in 2022, and during Sheryl's time, she introduced Māori wards for Whangārei, whoop whoop, and also was instrumental in the development of Te Kārearea. So just thank you, Sheryl, for your leadership amongst our community for all of those years, and it's great to have you work with us tonight. And I'm going to hand over to Sheryl, who's going to hold the space for the rest of the evening. So kia ora e hoa.
No mai, haere mai. Welcome to you all. Thank you for taking the time to be here for this in this special place, complete with your inquisitive minds. Thank you to Network Waitangi Whangārei for bringing together this Treaty and Me series. We're so privileged to have Avril Bell with us as the first speaker in the series of 4. The format for this evening is that Avril will speak for about 45 minutes. Then there'll be a Q&A session. You'll learn a little bit more about that later, but we anticipate that session will take about half an hour or more or less. Now, it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Avril. Avril is a Pākehā New Zealander and Honorary Associate Professor in Sociology at the University of Auckland. She said to me before, that just means I don't get paid.
Sounds flash.
But it sounds really good. And of course, if you Google this woman, you come up with all sorts of really interesting facts and figures. But her research centres on the legacy of settler colonialism in making sense of Pākehā identities, New Zealand national identity, and Māori Pākehā relations. She's written the books Relating Indigenous and Settler Identities Beyond Domination and Becoming Tangata Tiriti, which of course I'm sure she'll be speaking of tonight, and is co-editor of A Land of Milk and Honey, Making Sense of Aotearoa, New Zealand. She's also published many articles with titles including some really groovy words that I'm so pleased I get the opportunity to say. Things like bifurcation, strategic essentialism, conviviality and ontological styles. Wow, what a brain. I know you're in for a treat, and it's my absolute pleasure to invite Avril to speak. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi o te pō ki a koutou. Ngā mihi nui ki te tangata whenua o tēnei rohi. Hei mihi tēnei ki a koe, Sheryl. I tā koe pōhiri mai ahau, ki tēnei kaupapa. And my acknowledgements more generally to the whole Project Waitangi team for their amazing work and energy that you've put in over many, many years, right? I'm only getting to witness a tiny little smidgen of it today, but yeah, my hat is off to you. Yeah, well, it's so lovely to see all these people. Thank you so much for coming. It's a real pleasure to be here, and it's a real honour to be given the opportunity to be the first of the 4 speakers that you're going to have in this amazing series. So I hope that's quite a responsibility, isn't it? We've got to make them want to come back for the next 3 weeks. You've got 3 more. It's only going to get better as the weeks go by. Now, just Sheryl, I wasn't sure if she was having a go at us academics with our big words, but maybe, just quietly. But I just want to reassure you that this book, which is what I've been asked to speak about tonight, has really got none of those big words in it. Although conviviality is not that big a word. But yeah, so this is what my kaupapa is tonight, to talk about this recent book, Becoming Tangata Tiriti, Working with Māori, Honouring the Treaty. See, no big words in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about how the book came about and talk a little bit about some of the key messages in the book, what it is, who it's for, and Sheryl's going to tell me if I go on too long and I need to be told to wind up. That'd be really good. I don't think there's anything else I need to say by way of introduction. I think I'll just get started. So this book is the latest kind of attempt on my part to explore a question that I've been thinking about for about 20 years. Observing, that, because, I'm a person of a certain age. So over my lifetime, things have changed a lot in terms of the position of iwi and hapu in particular, really, in our country. So when I was growing up, the Māori world was really pushed out to the margins. That was what settler colonialism was all about, to destroy that world. It's not ever been achieved, but it was pushed out to the margins. Marae were down dusty country roads. Kaitaia, where I grew up, which I'm sure you all know and love, was very much a Pākehā-dominated town, even though there's a high Māori population up there, But now it's changed a lot. I didn't know the names of the iwi of Muri Whenua when I was growing up. I know them all now. Lots of things have changed. And that is just a teensy-weensy example of that change. And I do think that treaty settlements, imperfect as they are, have been a really important catalyst for those changes, which have allowed iwi and hapu to take a more prominent, more appropriate role in our communities in terms of the economics, politics, culture, and so on. So I was interested, about 20 years ago I started thinking, I wonder how Pākehā working in, and I was thinking about Pākehā working in mainstream organisations, horrible term, how they're getting with the program. Are they stepping up, learning new ways of operating and engaging constructively with iwi and hapu and helping them try to kind of pursue their goals, or are they being obstructive and getting in the way as much as possible? And I was particularly interested in obvious, organisations like local government are one of the ones that immediately come to mind, because they have such a prominent role to play with iwi and hapu in relation to settlement issues and stuff too, eh? And then of course DOC and all sorts of things. So anyway, this book comes out of this question. So it's focused on people's work lives, it's focused on, I've moved on, I still identify as Pākehā, happily, proudly call myself Pākehā, but we're a very multicultural country these days. So I think when we're trying to think about the relationships between Māori and the rest of us, Pākehā does not include all of us, I often hear Asian New Zealanders or other New Zealanders of different ethnic groups say, well, what about us? Where do we fit in, So this lovely idea of tangata tiriti, I think, is the best term we have at the moment that does the beautiful job of encompassing all of us who don't whakapapa Māori. If we whakapapa Māori, then we are tangata whenua, right? We're the people of the land. The rest of us are tangata tiriti, or becoming tangata tiriti, people of the treaty, which is literally what that term means. So I've forgotten where I started that rave. The people I went to talk to. So I went looking for people who I would call Tangata Tiriti. The people, you know, what's happening in these workplaces. And I asked Māori leaders that I knew from different places around the motu, who do they find good to work with? Is there anyone, who would you recommend that I approach to be part of this research project? And so some of the people in the book came to me through that means. Some I already knew about by reputation, but I really did, you know, the idea of Māori telling me rather than me thinking, oh, those people are really cool, was obviously the best way. And then some people I heard about via word of mouth along the way. So the book is really based on interviews with what ended up being 12 people, so not a huge number of people. And it's lots of their voices and a little bit of mine stitching the whole thing together. Them sharing their experiences, their learnings, their journeys, that's hence the becoming thing, you know, because the changes they've been through time and so on, some advice they would pass on to others. And the point of doing this, apart from my personal curiosity, was that in the book, when I was writing the book, the people I had in mind as the ideal readers, because it isn't academic and full of big words, is people in the general public, and particularly I was thinking about people whose jobs give them the opportunity or expect them in this world we live in now to work with Māori. To work with Māori communities, to work with Māori colleagues, whatever kind of form that might take. And I feel, even though we've got this government at the moment, which is kind of taking us in quite negative directions around things Māori, there is still just a lot of organisations that are just getting on with the mahi, basically. There's lots and lots of organisations with treaty policies, with Māori staffing policies, businesses that are keen to work with iwi and other Māori businesses, and so on and so forth, you know. So they, the kind of, when you get down, lower down, things just kind of continue on. So my feeling and hope was that there would be a lot of people who would be interested, would be relevant to, and maybe like me, even though they're probably a lot younger than me, haven't grown up or didn't grow up with an easy kind of entree into the Māori world. Because let's face it, I mean, as I say, things have changed a lot over my lifetime, but still, we've only just started teaching ourselves our history, for example. We haven't been encouraged to learn the language or, you know, other such things like that. So I think there's still a lot of people out there who I think would be grateful to read about other people's experiences. So that's how the whole thing came about, and something about the people. I call them ordinary and extraordinary. Ordinary because I know these 12 people are a drop in the bucket, you know, that there's hundreds, thousands more, and there's many of them in this room, I'm sure, you know, many people in this room who fit the bill, who are doing similar kinds of work. So they're ordinary in that sense, but they also, they're extraordinary. They've accumulated a lot of experience and insights, and they're very articulate and thoughtful and reflective and have a lot of, you know, valuable things to share with us. Okay, so I wanted to say something about Tangata Tiriti. I'm aware that there's a lot of people in this room are very familiar with the term and are happy about it. I've already mentioned the value of it as a kind of an inclusive term that includes all non-Māori New Zealanders. And I also want to acknowledge Sir Edward Tahakuri Kure, Jury, who, as far as I know, coined this term and used it in the way that I use it in the book. Eddie Jury will be a name familiar to some people, maybe not to others. He was the chair of the Waitangi Tribunal, very influential chair of the Waitangi Tribunal for quite a long time, I think like a decade or something. And he was a chief Māori Land Court judge. So, you know, a very esteemed family, the Juries, a very esteemed scholar and prominent Māori legal figure. And he used this term Tangata Tiriti, I think it was at Waitangi Day's speech once, back in late 1980s. And so the idea being that this, yeah, as I say, that the partner, the other side of the partnership established in Te Tiriti between tangata whenua and Tangata Tiriti. Now the other crucial thing, and this kind of comes back to the becoming part of the title of the book, is that it's not really a matter of us all just like, oh, sweet, I don't have to feel worried about my place here, I'm Tangata Tiriti, and I could just go around calling myself that. Because the other side of the story, and I've certainly seen Māori and heard Māori, read Māori people saying this, that we need to live up to the term. That if we're going to call ourselves Tangata Tiriti, we need to take responsibility for our reflecting on and developing our own sense of what the Te Tiriti means to us, what it means to be Tangata Tiriti, what our responsibilities are to our Māori that come from that agreement, and so on and so forth. So that, hence the becoming in that way, right? So it's a journey that people might choose to pick up. And in terms of what the people in the book said at the highest level about what it meant to be Tangata Tiriti, what there was like, or what you're aiming towards, what your kaupapa is. It was supporting rangatiratanga, so supporting Māori authority, getting out of the way sometimes, standing alongside sometimes, helping create some kind of space, whatever, just, all kinds of ways of being supportive. Supporting the flourishing of Te Ao Māori more broadly across the myriad kind of sectors and forms of action and so on. And also working with our own people, which Ngaire mentioned already, and is of course, the prime job of organisations like Network Waitangi, and they have been doing for a number of decades now, in terms of educating our own about Te Tiriti, about our history, and so on. So those are the three, planks, I guess, of that idea. I will say this, I think, I think that the book isn't about the treaty, so it's kind of, I feel it's slightly, not fraudulent exactly, because the treaty is mentioned quite a number of times, but because it really centres on work and relationships between these non-Māori people and their Māori colleagues and the Māori communities that they work with and so on, and their kind of learnings and lessons. But they do mention Te Tiriti quite frequently, and they do see it as a kind of a guiding touchstone for them and for their decision making when they're in a tricky situation. There were some really cool questions that some of them said how they think, what would if I'm a difficult time making a decision, I think, well, what would rangatiratanga look like if in this space? Like, what would be the right thing to do from that perspective? Or what would I do if Te Tiriti was in place? And it's been interesting for me, because one of the big learnings one of the things that's really reinforced for me doing this work is how much of a treasure or a gift Te Tiriti is. It's not a gift in the sense of someone gave it to us, but it is something we should treasure, because it does have that. And I think actually it's really good that it is a bit of an irritant. I think that's part of it, like maybe it's a bit like oysters and pearls. You only get the beautiful thing from the irritation of the sand, right, inside the oyster. I do think there's some value in the fact that we have two different, these days we more often talk about Te Tiriti as the treaty and the English version as the draft or a draft. But the fact that there is a bit of light and space between those two, I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because it means we have to keep on talking about it. Counter to what some impulses might be around tying down what treaty principles really might mean in any given circumstance. I think there's value in keeping things and a relationship. It's all about a relationship, basically, right? So keeping that lively, because things change over time, and what works in 1995 isn't necessarily going to work in 2025 or whatever. It's not going to be the top priority or whatever. So I've really, over time, come to really appreciate Te Tiriti much more than I used to. Okay, so in terms of the things that people talked about what they saw was like core things they needed, that they learnt and needed to kind of put in place in their work. You won't be surprised to hear that they talked about the importance of relationships and building relationships into the Māori world. Some of them grew up already kind of living alongside Māori communities, but many didn't. And for those like me who are Pākehā, and Andrew Judd is the exemplary case here, and I'm sure Andrew Judd is a name that is familiar to many people, the former mayor of New Plymouth, he's been to Whangārei, I know, talking about his being a recovering racist, and maybe talking about Māori wards. I don't know if he's come here and talked about that as well, but maybe. Okay, lost the plot. That whole thing about relationships. He is so good at expressing his fear of the Māori world and how he just was terrified of going to the marae. And so, and there's many people who are like that, have never been to a marae and are just, don't know what to do and feel bad about they don't know what to do. Particularly us Pākehā we feel like we should know, we've lived here all our lives. Maybe our families have lived here for generations, but we don't know how to comport ourselves. We don't know basic tikanga or whatever else. So that whole thing of having to get over that hurdle was one of the things that was talked about in terms of relationships. There's a concept of Pākehā paralysis that's not too big a word, is it? Even though it is actually in the academic literature. But it's a particularly Pākehā problem, I think. But that sort of describes that the way that fear and anxiety paralyses us, and so we don't do it. We don't put our foot out, we don't take that step, we don't make that effort, we don't go up and talk to that person, we don't sign up for whatever. And so talking about how people can overcome in their own stories, how they overcame their anxieties or being rebuffed as well. Talking to asking a Māori colleague for help and them not being willing to help, not having the time to help you out, being rebuffed and then not taking that as a end of story. So there's a lot of detail and around the kind of different ways in which relationships were built for different people. And the other thing about the relationships is people learned a lot about the value of how much Māori value relationships, right? And how really, often in the Pākehā world, particularly we're talking about the world of work, right? You've got a job, you've got a project, you've got a deadline, you make a connection with somebody to do this job, and then when the job's over, it's like, thanks, that was great, see you later. Whereas in the Māori world, it's almost like the reverse is, the priorities are kind of reversed. It's like the relationship is the really key thing. Okay, the job needs to be done and everything, and you want to get together to do that, but you hope that the relationship will be maintained and that things are long term. And so people, talked about that kind of learning and about what they gain, the riches they gain from these kind of long-term relationships into Te Ao Māori. They all talked about Māori generosity as well. They all talked about the generosity of their Māori friends and colleagues, and some of them had stories to tell that embarrassed them about terrible faux pas, mistakes they'd made, and things, and how kindly Māori were putting up with this stuff. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff about relationships, making relationships, getting over ourselves, holding on to relationships. It takes a bit of effort to keep your relationships lively, and a lot of gratitude for those relationships too. I've mentioned, I feel like I'm going to finish in like a flash. How am I going time-wise?
You've got heaps.
Heaps. I don't want to just rabbit on though. I've talked a little bit about the need to support rangatiratanga, but that can be quite challenging, and particularly again for us Pākehā. We're used to being, in the centre of things. We're used to being decision makers. We're used to things going our way, and it'd be really good if we do it like this. But these Māori people got some other random idea that you don't really see the logic of, or whatever. So knowing when to kind of step back, get out of the way, be quiet. There was quite a lot of talk about that. There was a lovely line that one of the women in the project talked about, when she talked about, you know, just being quiet, being collaborative, working together, that's where the magic lies. You know, that's when something magic happens. And I have to say, this isn't outside my project, although I did mention it in here. There was a really cool series of articles done last year, I think, in the newsroom online kind of newspaper thing, by this really great journalist, and she did a series on co-governance relationships. So she went to these different organisations that had co-governance models, because, you know, that was a big topic of conversation. And they all talked about the richness and the magic and the unexpected great outcomes that came out of their co-governance relationships, because they said things might take more time, you know, so getting away from that typical deadline has to happen in this time frame, but that you end up with maybe some surprising outcome that wasn't inside your brain, but also a robust outcome, because you spent the time to get all these different people to a point of agreement, you know, so you've got something that's going to be strong and lasting. So yeah, that's kind of fits, I think, for me with that, you know, making space for rangatiratanga and working with Māori authority. Another thing that was talked about, one of the things I like about the book, I really didn't want to write a book that sort of gave anybody the idea that, oh yeah, I do these 5 things and I'll be sweet, you know, I'll be Tangata Tiriti. Because we're talking about relationships, so it is you can't have a formula. There isn't a formula. So I didn't want it to be that kind of book. So I was really pleased that there were things that came up that were paradoxes, or there was, you know, and different people had different views. Like there's paradoxes between, like, on the one hand we need to step up, take responsibility for ourselves, be active and contribute and useful. On the other hand, we need to step back and get out of the way. You know, it's like, oh, when do you do what, you know? It's not straightforward, you have to figure it out. Yeah, so stuff like that, you know, that's a kind of a paradox. But an area where there was kind of quite diverse opinions was when people were talking about whether or not we should learn Te Reo Māori. And I think everybody thought that we should, ultimately, like as a nation, the ideal would be if we all spoke Te Reo Māori so that you could hear the language in any context, and any Māori person could walk up to you in a shop or at work or on the street or whatever and start a conversation in Te Reo with the confidence that you would be able to reply. And wouldn't that be, you know, so much better? Because that's the way to ensure this language really is healthy and survives in the longer term. So they would all agree with that. But a number of them were like, well, it's not really my priority right now, 1. 2, they were worried that, you know, we can just be a little bit too appropriative or colonising. That learning the language could be used in a colonising way. Actually, I remember I went to a week of the Ngāpui hearings, Waitangi Tribunal hearings up at Te Marae back in whatever year it was. And it just blew me away, the Crown lawyer getting up and speaking fluent Māori. It was pretty naive of me to be blown away, because I think that's probably a requisite of the job. But I thought, like, God, how could you have spent so much time getting so good at the language and then be arguing on that side? But, you know, so just because, yeah, and I know they actually move around, like they might work for Office of Treaty Settlements for a while and then they might go and work for an iwi on the other side, so hey. But, so, yeah, there was various ideas about our learning of Te Reo Māori. There's also the thing you sometimes hear about, we shouldn't be taking up spaces in courses, or, you know, necessarily don't want to take up a space that a Māori person could be taking. But at the same time, they all thought we should know some basics. And there was a nice phrase that one of the participants used called there was some necessary learning and just kind of good manners that required us to, at absolute minimum, to work on our pronunciation so that we can pronounce Māori words with some degree of accuracy, you know, not the way that, I think when I was a kid, I was trying to remember if it was Whangārei or Whangārei, one of those that we used to come through on our way to Auckland, you know. So we need to get way past all that stuff and make an effort. And they also thought that we should know some basic tika. We should, as has been demonstrated by our friends tonight, you know, we should be able to do a karakia, we should be able to do a mihi mihi, we should know some waiata. Well, I'm sorry, I didn't know that one. So those, they also, another thing about learning is they did all talk about us needing to learn about our history, our colonial history. And I actually think New Zealanders just are desperate to know things actually about our history, because it amazes me, because publishing in New Zealand is quite a hard business, you know. But we also, I think, must be a great nation of readers, because there's books coming out all the time, and there's massive amounts of history books that come out, so somebody must be buying them and reading them, which I take great heart from. So we can do a lot of education for ourselves just through, you know, buying those books or getting them out of the library and educating ourselves. We could also download Waitangi Tribunal reports, which people don't realise often, that they're all freely available on the Waitangi Tribunal website. You can put your area, the country you live in, and find the reports that relate to your area, download them, read them. They've got executive summaries if you don't want to wade you through the whole way through the whole thing. But you know, you can learn a lot about the place you live in, the places you grew up, and so on, and the history that the tangata whenua of your area have gone through, you know. Okay, so the book, another thing that I really came to understand from when I was working out what to take out of it, well, when I was well down the drafting probably, and just seeing what it all added up to when I'd taken these quotes out of these interviews and put them all together, was just how much of a win-win situation it is. Because we sometimes have, there are people in our society who think and encourage the thinking that if Māori get something, we're all going to lose something. That, you know, it's a zero-sum game. Somebody has to be the winner and the other side has to be the loser. Whereas it's so apparent when I read through the interviews just how these people that I spoke to, their lives were enriched by their engagement with the Māori world and all the things they learnt from Māori and those relationships and everything, but also their actual sense of who they were as New Zealanders, you know, their sense of their place here. Because that's another thing, people get worried about, you know, are we going to be pushed out or pushed? Are Māori going to do to us what we did to them? But that's, you know, in contrast to that kind of fear, these people all felt much more comfortable and secure in their sense of belonging here. And I think that's a really important thing to remember and hold on to, really, I guess. And for me, it fit. There was a survey conducted earlier this year by a political scientist at Waikato about, and I can't even remember what the whole topic of the survey was, but one of the questions was, what's the most important event that happened in New Zealand history? And more than half the people, 60-something%, put Te Tiriti of Waitangi. So this is a decent survey, right? Not like a TV station survey or a radio station survey or something. It's a representative, over 1,000 people, the right proportion of Māori, Pākehā, Indian, Chinese, whatever, right proportion of age groups across the population, and probably, and genders, no doubt, and income levels, all that sort of thing. So it's quite real data, right? So it's a fact, not a made-up fact. And as good as we can get without asking every person in the population. But the other thing that was interesting is that the people who were positive about Te Tiriti were also really positive about diversity and about unity, as about the importance of unity and a unity in diversity. So not that idea that we all have to be the same to be New Zealanders, we have to only be one kind, but the opposite of that. And they were also really positive about the importance of things like treaty settlements and various kind of practices of repair for the history of injustice that Māori communities have experienced. So I think that for me fits with the win-win kind of thing, and is also a really optimistic sign about possibilities for our future. I am going to finish up. I've got one more thing to say, or maybe it's two, but whatever. It was a real privilege to get to talk to these people. I suppose it's my last kind of academic, even though it's not academic, but you know, whatever. The research was done when I was still getting paid. And I'm a sociologist, so sociologists, if any of you some of you might have done sociology papers at university at some point or another, we're very critical. So you can get, you know, we can feel like very negative people because we spend our lives telling people what's wrong with society. We're very focused on injustices and things like that, so we spend a lot of time being quite negative and critical. So it was an absolute joy to be able to write this book, or when I carry out this project where I got to talk to really cool people who I admired, and then write this thing where I celebrated what they do. So that was fantastic. And I also just want to finally acknowledge it's slightly awkward that, you know, this is all, the celebrating these people is slightly awkward because all their learning and their achievements and the things I'm celebrating are all, you know, only possible because of the Māori communities and friends and mentors and whatever that they have worked with and have stood alongside them and have put up with them and encouraged them and all the rest of it. And of course, there is the, you know, the injustice and pain and all those things that those people, those Māori communities are working to overcome as well. So I just have to, you know, acknowledge that underpinning, even though it's not really visible in the book. Okay, kia ora.
Wow. I know that would have triggered all sorts of things in your minds and hopefully triggered some questions that you were wanting to be asking. But I just want to reflect on a couple of things that hopefully you noticed that I was taking notes. It's very handy having a pen.
I said you should write a shopping list out.
I don't know if you noticed, but Avril has a pencil here, and she also noted that she thinks better when she has a pencil in her hand, and I think I'm the same way, thinking with a pen in my hand. I promise I won't steal the pencil. But just a couple of things. Thank you for taking the time to meet with ordinary and extraordinary New Zealanders who you've captured their stories. And I can say that I bought a copy of the book today. Yes, and there are a very limited number out the back, but you can also buy them online, so I encourage you to do that. You also mentioned about the being able to get Waitangi Tribunal reports. There's also a really important document available here, I know, Ngāpuhi Speaks, which documents the evidence that was given from Ngāpuhi, and I just tingled thinking of that. It's a really important book. And I was also really intrigued with your description of Te Tiriti being the irritant which creates the pearl, the thing of great beauty. So those are just a few of the things. I'm going to hand over to Ngaire, who is going to describe to you how our Q&A session is going to work. And I'm hoping that in the time that it takes me to sit down, you will have started thinking about those questions that you want to ask, and I'll pass back the pencil. Thanks, Ngaire.
Kia ora everyone. We've got a little bit of a different way of doing Q&A tonight. So often in settings like this, we do, you know, hands up, people stand up and ask a question. And often you find it'll be the people that are comfortable public speaking. Like I'd be fine to ask. In fact, I have got lots of questions. But the way we're actually going to do it tonight is we're going to hand out some post-it notes and pens and encourage you to chat to the person next to you, to have a think, what might be your question, or even, what might be your question, and then we'll gather those questions up and we'll collate them, and then we'll give them to Sheryl for Avril to answer. So you've got a few minutes. We'll go round. Yetta and others of us will come around and hand out the post-it notes. So have a think about what your question might be, and it's completely fine if you don't have a question as well, but this is your opportunity to have your question answered. So kia ora.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you all for the time you've taken to craft some curly questions. I hope you enjoyed that the process of thinking about what you were going to ask. I now have the pleasure of posing these questions to Avril, and she's asked me to make sure that I pass the paper on so she can reread them if necessary. But this has been selected as the first of many questions, and the theming is still going on. So thanks to the team who have worked through that. This question: one of the key pathways to tino rangatiratanga is through ownership of capital by Māori. What more could we do to accelerate this transfer of power?
Kia ora. A curly one. Big, solid, fat question. One of the ways we translate rangatiratanga is as sovereignty, right? Māori sovereignty. Māori didn't cede sovereignty. That was what the core argument of Ngāpuhi in that tribunal claim, and that when they signed Te Tiriti, they didn't cede sovereignty, and the Waitangi Tribunal agreed with them. So that's... And I think the thing about ownership of capital, because the thing about it's all very well to have authority, or sovereignty, but you have to have capacity to enact it, right? So if you're the United States, you have a lot more capacity to enact your sovereignty than if you're New Zealand, enact your authority, right? Just because you have a lot more capacity. In the legal sense of the word, in the international forum, we all have the equal sovereignty, but they have more capacity. So I think that's, for me, the key thing about the transfer of capital to Māori, and that's where that has been one of the number of values of treaty settlements. We know that the amount of money that has been granted or given to Māori in treaty settlements is minuscule compared to the value of what was lost, right? It's been calculated at something like 1 to 2% of the value of what the Māori economy would be in any particular area if they had been able to keep their lands and the economy they had going and build on it from 1860s or whatever. So it's minuscule, but it is something. And so, yes, I think the person who's written this question is thinking that, that ownership of capital has enabled iwi and hapu to assert their authority, to assert their rangatiratanga around the country, in their own lands particularly, and nationally. And we see it, when the government and the politicians turn up to, important things like Waitangi Day. They turn up to Ratana every January. They turned up to Kingi Tuheitia. Most of them turned up to his Koronehana, and they all turned up to his tangihanga. But what more could be done to sell it? But I don't think it's the same. It's the only thing, right? The economics is not the only thing, because it's also the politics. So I think but the question isn't going that way, really. It's really saying, what more could we do to accelerate this transfer of power? I think political power sharing is another plank, right? So there's what Māori might do with their economic putia and how they will grow their economy and so on, but the political side is really kind of brings us back to our political structures and our political processes, and I suspect the number, I don't know the maths on this, but I'm sure the number of Māori seats in Parliament is probably less than it should be if we were doing it by demographics. Yeah, must be, eh? Because we've got 120 MPs and we've got 60 electorate seats, and Māori are 20% of the population in the latest census, so whatever 20% of 60 is, it's more than 7, I'm sure. So things like that, the Māori wards and local government, and neither of these things are perfect either, obviously, and this is where Mātaki Mai comes in, you know, and the whole question of how we might really more radically transform our political structures to be more thoroughly power sharing. And the organisations that have adopted co-governance models, and many organisations that have, and like, I think back to the Anglican Church, I don't know not much about the ins and outs, right? But there's probably people in this room who do. I mean, the Anglican Church for many years has had a tripartite structure of, you know, a Pākehā church, a Māori church and a Pacific church. And there's many organisations that have co-governance models, and they are templates, in a sense, for some of the things that are possible if we put our mind to it. So I'm not really answering the question because it's a hard one, but I agree with the question that economics and capital are really significant to Māori ability to exercise their rangatiratanga, to have the capacity to exercise it, but it's not the root of it, I guess. I mean, the root of it lies in, you know, just Māori being tangata whenua, really, isn't it, you know? And the fact that, as Ngā Pui argued, they didn't ever cede that status. And so I think, yeah, addressing our political structures is one of the things we can do to help the process along.
Sure.
What's next?
Are you ready?
Not sure.
There's some themes coming through there in a number of these questions, and I think the one for me that covers it easily says, how does one identify the need to recover from their racism? Asking for a friend. Love that. But there's also, on a similar theme, how do you address or call conversations that include subtle racism jokes?
Oh, nice, yeah.
And what's a respectful response? There was another one, how to have confronting conversations with Pākehā friends or colleagues who are making racist comments. So that's a really lovely theme that actually a number of are coming through.
Okay. Am I taking all of them? There seem to be a lot of pieces of paper there, more than 3, but that's okay. That's cool. I'm having that. I'm having those. How do you address blatant racism? Is that where we started? We didn't start there, did we?
No.
Where did we start? How does one identify the need to recover from their racism? I love that. I just think we can all be. We've all got the capacity to be racist or think racist thoughts or whatever, because, and we've grown. So I just think we just take it for granted that we've got the need to recover from our racism, because we were raised. When I say we in this instance, I'm actually really talking about Pākehā, because there's so many kind of elements to this. We were raised in a kind of culture that believes in some form or another in our own superiority somehow. You know, it went back to we were superior. We had Christianity, we were converting the heathen. We had civilization, and we were civilizing the barbarians or the savages. And the modern version of that we hear about is, you know, progress, development, you know, not kind of holding on to these outdated traditions or whatever. That's kind of modern variations on that. And there's other kind of just stereotypes, right? We've been exposed to media that has been, or, you know, just the stereotypes that make us feel anxious at the sight of a big tattooed Māori man in the street or whatever. And that's not like, it's not even like, we're not choosing necessarily to have these feelings or responses or thoughts pop into our minds, but they're there because we were educated in a culture and in a society that has planted all sorts of stuff in us. And so I think we all have the capacity to go there, and that's just something to be aware of, I guess. How do you address subtle racism? Oh, how do we get more people to join the Reforming Racist Anonymous group? Tricky, isn't it? Is there a group that's called that? Nice. Is it on Facebook or something? That wouldn't be very anonymous though, would it? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's a matter of, it's a bit like consciousness raising, back in the old feminist consciousness raising, sitting around and talking about your problems with racism, or your friends, obviously, your friends or your uncles or your brothers or somebody else's, because, it's harder to say it yourself. But I think it's a problem when we think that some people are racist and some people are not, and it's those people that are the worry. I don't think that's particularly useful or helpful. We've all got, we can all make progress in our lives one way or another. How do we address conversations that include subtle racism, and then how do you address blatant racism in individuals, especially when you belittle, they belittle, when you believe that, Tiriti, but lack the confidence to be articulate. Yeah, that's tricky, eh? And how do you, that's all about how you address it. It's so tricky. And I've read academic papers about this question. I've talked with students about this question. It's not easy, there's no one answer. And I think there's good reasons why people don't sometimes say anything. Often we don't say anything because we just want to keep the peace, and we want to still be able to kind of meet up with our families or whatever. Or it's our boss or whatever, there's reasons why you don't. And also there can be reasons why people do challenge racism that are really just self-aggrandising, not necessarily. So the point is really not sort of to challenge somebody front on necessarily. It's not necessarily the best way, but how can you try to change people? Typically, challenging them front on does not change them. So you've got to think, what's your point in saying something? If you're just wanting to say something to get it off your chest because you can't bear it, or you want to say something because you want to make sure everybody understands you don't agree or whatever, But if you really wanted to change people, I think, and I'm not an expert on this, but there's a fabulous political scientist down at Victoria, Emily Beausoleil, who does lots of fabulous, she's like these lovely Network Waitangi people, they might even know her. She does lots of activist work as well as her academic work, and she's done a lot of work around the power of listening, really, really listening to people. So she would tell us to ask them questions. Right, the first thing we would do would be to ask them, to try to find out what's behind the thing. It's tricky with the subtle racist joke. That's like, that's not, because then they're just going to say, oh, it's only a joke. So that one's a hard one. But if somebody's saying that something really blatantly racist, you could try to engage them in a conversation. I think is the most likely to be productive way to go. To try to find out. So what she talks about is to try to get at what's underpinning it. What is the thing they're concerned about? Like, the ACT Party is doing a genius job of using the word equality. Nobody is against equality, are they? We all believe in equality. So you have, but what do they mean by it versus what I might want to see as equality? So you will find that behind people's things that are making them say these things is some concern or some value that you can then hook to and connect to some, because Māori want equality too, right? They want to have an equal chance in the society and so on and so forth. So you try to kind of get them to open their eyes to see the issue in a different way. And I guess the other thing that often would come up is there's a lot of emotion behind racism, racist comments, and that often anger and denial, and usually behind that is fear. So getting at what those fears are of, what they're fearful of or about. So that's the best answer I can give. I can't tell you I'm an expert, I'd have to say. And I know I have people and challenges in my own family. And I have had no success whatsoever in my lifetime of changing the reality of that.
How does Emily spell her surname? Beausoleil?
Beausoleil, so Beau as the French, it's French. So it's like, it's a beautiful sun or something. It's a gorgeous name, eh? So Beausoleil, like, yeah, Cirque du Soleil, right?
Soleil.
Isn't it Cirque du Soleil?
Beautiful. I'm looking her up when I go home.
Yeah, no, she's fantastic. Did I miss anything? Because there's too many pieces of paper there. Oh, is this my next one? No.
Well, they should have...
No, they're all together.
You finished those ones?
We finished those.
Well done.
These are all about
I hope.
organisational change, how to change an
Oh,
organisation.
nice.
So how do you go down the path of collaboration when time and resources for an organisation is limited?
You could answer these questions too.
Tangata Tiriti, they're not here to hear from me. Tangata Tiriti and organisations organising themselves collectively. Tangata Tiriti Rōpū, can you give examples? What were the barriers the individuals found in being able to work towards rangatiratanga from within their workplace?
This is a lot of different things, really.
Yeah, aren't you lucky? Do you want any more?
It feels like enough already. Or is
I
that,
think
is that
so.
really related? Do we just go with these?
I think this is a different one.
Kia ora, thank you. Okay, this question, are tangata tiriti and organisations organising themselves collectively? It's a very good question. Tangata tiriti rōpū. No, I don't know about this. It's a very good question. I know that in the University of Auckland, Māori staff are starting to organise themselves collectively, which is great, you know, and there's a kind of active policy to employ more Māori. And but yeah, I don't know. Do you know of any that do that? Any tangata tiriti?
I don't.
But it's a genius idea if
It
you
is.
want people who... I do, like the professional development work I do for the university at the moment, we kind of encourage people to come and take the course that we do as in with their workmates, so with their actual team that they work in within the massive organisation, with the hope that then they go back and they can... So in a way, they'd be like a little tangata tiriti rōpū, or we hope that might be a seed towards them, you know, like there being 3 or 4 of them in their group, then it would all support some kind of new initiative. But yeah, I love that. I like that idea. Right, but I can't say I know of any. How do you go down the path of collaboration when time and resources is limited? That's such a hard one, because that's the reality, and this is where you would have things to say. Yeah, we can only do with the things within the limits of... I think we can kind of push things a little bit, obviously. But the other thing, one of the things that people talked about, or one of the things that was obvious in talking about relationships, the people I talked to in the book, was that, you know, there's deadlines and things, but to work to maintain relationships after the deadline, you know, for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and then you become more and more, you're already halfway there in terms of, you know, things about each other and you're willing to share. You have trust. Trust was another thing that was really big that people talked about, you know, being that trustworthy. And one of my participants talked about being an honourable treaty partner, you know, or tiriti partner. So, yeah, I mean, the deadlines are a reality, but apart from when you can force institutional change to change that. And those things are not always easy either, are they? Because you've got outside your organisation, you've got the other ones up above you that are imposing the deadlines and so on. But but how to go down the path of collaboration? It all depends where you're talking about too, because are you talking about collaborating with your Māori colleagues who are already inside the organisation with you, or you're talking about collaborations out with Māori communities. One of the big learnings, and this goes back to the whole thing about supporting rangatiratanga that people talked about, is if you want to collaborate with Māori, you don't go, I've got this really cool project and we're going to do this, this and this, and will you guys help us or join us, or can you help us with this? But you go at the beginning, you don't even have a project, you know, like you, and I've had somebody at work say this to me recently in their research, they basically go to a Māori community and say, let's say we're dental health researchers. What are the issues for you guys? What would be useful or helpful? Is there anything useful or helpful that we could do or work on with you that would be relevant to your community? So you design, so you start from the beginning. That's collaboration, so however you do it. And that could just be with one person, I guess. That's the other thing. Another thing out of the book is that just start small. We all only have a limited sphere. None of us are God. We can't do everything, and we can't change the world overnight. And we all have strengths and weaknesses. And just go with your strengths and go with your sphere and do one thing, and then another thing, and another thing. Who was it that said something beautiful to me today? Was that you, Ngaire? No, it was someone, they're probably still in the room, about their work and using te reo Māori. Because one of the things that came up too, I think earlier today, was about sometimes worrying about being tokenistic or appropriative. And I think this person had been challenged for whether it was appropriate for them to use te reo Māori in their work. And they were working with somebody from Black Power, went in, introduced themselves in te reo Māori, said something, said hello, whatever. And the Black Power guy started crying. So don't underestimate the small things, the tiny things, and how impactful that might be to somebody who has not been respected, for who they are, met over and over again, kind of thing. What were the barriers that individuals found in being able to work towards rangatiratanga within their workplace? Of course, there's always kind of the other people who don't want to go along the ride with you, I guess. And there's all those institutional barriers of the deadlines and the funding limits and the whatever. I don't think I can think particularly of anything additional. I guess having Māori, this is where the increasing Māori staff numbers in organisations can be really helpful and important, to have a stronger representation, and also to have Māori who are employed specifically as Māori, and that happens in councils, doesn't it? To be the people who are the iwi liaison person, or to be the person who's like a cultural advisor type person that you can turn to or whatever. So there's not enough people to do the work, right? There's not enough Māori to do all the work, so we have to step up and so on. But if you want to work towards rangatiratanga, you need to be able to work alongside Māori. So that kind of upping the proportion of Māori, I think, is a real issue. I think that's enough. Is that enough?
It segues, though, with the 12 people. There's a question here.
Oh, yeah.
Did you interview any private sector workers, and how do roles and responsibilities change, if at all, and relationships to Te Tiriti change in corporate or for-profit sectors?
Yeah. There was another question about the people in the book too. Where did that one go to? Maybe that's coming later. Did I interview any private sector workers? Yes, I guess. I interviewed people, I was really keen and interested in local government, so I had 2 former mayors, Andrew Judd and Meng Foon, so famous, well-known people, and some other people who worked in local government. I did talk to some people who worked in tertiary education as researchers or primary as researchers or regular academics, but I also talked to people who were in the arts sector. I'm not sure if that's private sector, so like event organisers, arts organisation managers, because a lot of those organisations do have public funding, but they're not the state as such. They're not like the state. And then I talked to an archaeologist who works, I guess she works in a private sector capacity because she works alongside, developers, developing subdivisions or The roading companies, when they're putting new roads through and they uncover human remains or other, middens or whatever. And so therefore she works alongside iwi experts and they are part of the kind of team who works out what has to happen. Does this thing need to be diverted? Can we take these things out? What are they? Whose are they? Where should they go? Whatever, all those kinds of things. So there were a bit of a mix. But I didn't talk to any business people as such. But I know there are business people out there who would fit the bill, How do roles and responsibilities change, if at all, and relationships to Te Tiriti change in corporate for-profit sectors? Yeah, interesting. Sometimes those, depends on the corporate, eh? If you're like Air New Zealand, you're quite big, so you've got a lot of capacity to have lots of professional development for your staff and to have, to really go on a journey of treaty-based policies and so on. But a lot of New Zealand businesses are quite small, so they don't have those kind of capacities. But on the other hand, there's also, sometimes things are a lot easier in corporations than they can be in state sectors, because if the management wants to do it, it can just be done. It can be put into place. And but how do the roles and responsibilities change? I don't think that the basic kaupapa or the basic requirements are really any different. But maybe some of the ways that things unfold. And really, honestly, I'm kind of talking outside my area of expertise to some degree, so I'm just sorry. Getting some curly questions. Hope I'm not too disappointed with the responses.
I'm particularly thrilled that these two people asked these questions, because I can't wait to hear your response to these. The first one is, do you have any insight about Pākehā reciting pepeha? Is this inclusiveness or cultural appropriation? Great question. And the other one is, can you talk about how te reo would be colonised if we all spoke it?
Oh, not if we all spoke it. Yeah, right. Yep, cool. Okay. Do I have any insight into Pākehā reciting pepeha? Yeah. Good question. And it is one that really comes up a lot, eh? So I'm currently working with a lovely young Māori man who doesn't use the word pepeha. He teaches our groups to introduce themselves in te reo Māori, but he doesn't call it a pepeha, and he doesn't teach them to say such and such as my maunga, such and such as my awa, whatever. We work from the fact that we come from different kind of cultural backgrounds, and I guess we're encouraged to say where we come from, like in an ancestral sense, where our ancestors come from. Māori love to know, or love us to know about our ancestors, and think of in that way, right? And think of themselves as, I shouldn't say they do them, not all Māori think the same way, but in Te Ao Māori, the living people are the present face of their kind of whakapapa line. I think that's a beautiful idea, so I think, and I love that, encouraging non-Māori to think about their own ancestral journey to themselves, and the inheritances we have from that, good and bad. But I know that I'm not sure if some Māori people are teaching non-Māori to recite a pepeha using that kind of what we kind of might call a Māori template of your mountain, your awa, your waka maybe, or whatever. I know that has happened in the past. But the other thing I think that I've picked up from Māori people I've worked with in the last few years is really that the primary thing is for people to do what feels genuine for them. So I've worked with people who have if you are a Scottish person and you come from a particular clan, you can say that is your iwi. And if you do have an ancestral, there's a maunga that your people live nearby and under, or a river that you live nearby, or a sea or whatever, if you want to say that, you say that. It's about what's genuine to the people. All that said, you can never be certain that everybody in the room is going to be happy with what you say. There will be people who won't like the way you've done it. You can be accused of appropriation or whatever. We have to not expect to be 100% safe. Because, we can't. We have to stay in our rooms if we want to be safe. And Māori have got diverse views about this question, and you might have 10 Māori people in the room and they won't all react in the same way to what you do, how you introduce yourself. So there's the main learning I have had from Māori people I have had the privilege to work alongside is you should do what's genuine to you, and what really expresses who you are. So can I talk about how Te Reo could be colonised if we all spoke it? Yeah. No, I think it's more that we can use it in colonising ways if we're using it to promote ourselves in some way. So people who learn Te Reo Māori to further their career as a primary motivation, or people who are kind of self-aggrandising with it. I mean, some of the people I talked to talked about it being in situations where even though they speak Te Reo Māori, they wouldn't, because it's not appropriate for the Pākehā person in the room to speak better than the Māori people in the room, kind of thing, And that is another thing that came up in people's conversation about going to courses, and I'm sure many people in this room have been to Te Reo Māori courses, and to be aware of how difficult and uncomfortable and sort of awful it can be for Māori who might be struggling to learn their mother tongue, which they feel terrible about that they've had to resort to this course because they were not raised learning it, and to be there sitting alongside a Pākehā person who's doing great, it's very tricky. We don't want to be inflicting more pain through our use of the reo. So I guess that's the kind of things that people talked about. So it's a hard one. So it's all hard, isn't it? Because we have this painful past.
We've got a big decision.
Holy moly.
Because we've got about 10 minutes left, because we do want to finish with a little bit of time so people can have a cup of tea and some more food. Yeah. And we did say we would finish at 9. No, it's all good. These are fabulous questions. So Cheryl's going to earn her money. Well, you could decide. So there's a bunch of questions, right, about the book and the people in the book, and a little bit more of the process about the research.
Yeah.
And then there's a bunch of questions that are all a little bit more political, like not different. A range of questions. There's
I'm
heaps of
intrigued.
questions.
The big pile is probably, in terms of democracy.
Yeah, okay then.
If people want to come and talk to me over a cup of tea about the process, about the book, I'm happy to talk about that.
Yeah.
I was going to do a poll in the room.
Oh, you do a poll? I did come to mind too, yeah. Which one do they want? Yeah.
Yeah, which pile should we...
That's democracy.
Hands up those who want this pile.
Those are the political questions. Who wants
Oh, typical. Two hands up.
No, they've got to do that again properly.
Okay, so on the one hand we have the ones that... What are these now?
Okay, these are the research. These are the ones that are more specifically about the book and the content and the research process.
Hands up if you want that. The other ones are all about more gnarly political questions, yeah?
Well, just more gnarly, kind of big, deep questions.
Deep. Who wants the deep questions?
Gnarly and deep.
Yes,
look at this audience. They don't want to go home.
They're up for it. They're up for it.
I mean, one of these was one of my questions.
Well, you and I could talk about that later, whatever it is.
Well, do I get to ask my question? So which poll did we end up with?
We're going with the gnarly, gritty one.
And there's a few, so you might have to choose. You might have to choose.
Ooh, I like this one. Because this one probably won't take long. In the context of our current multicultural society, what does Pākehā mean?
Ah, kia ora, that's a nice little one, yeah. I mean, again, you know, different people will say different things about it. But my own understanding, I think, you know, Māori just basically use it to talk about white people. So they will talk about Americans as Pākehā or whatever, you know, often. But in terms of like Pākehā as an identity, as something that a person will get up, like me, and say, he Pākehā ho, I'm a Pākehā. That's only in this place, only in this country, you know. And it generally, I think, is understood and used as white New Zealanders or New Zealanders of European descent. Whether your family have been here since 1840 or arrived in recent years, you could still decide to call yourself Pākehā. And I think for many people who do call themselves Pākehā, it is kind of an expression of some kind of commitment to this place. So it's like if you're an English person who's here for 2 years, oh, you might, you know, but you might not too, you might, and then you're going to go home again. So what does it mean? Oh, no, what in the context of So for me, I think if New Zealanders come in many flavours, you know, multicultural. One of the things I love about Pākehā, apart from the fact that it is only here, I can be, you know, this is the place, and it's one way of me claiming my place in New Zealand, I guess, and as a New Zealander. I like the fact that it makes us one kind of New Zealander amongst many. Instead of just the people who say, I'm a New Zealander, I'm just a New Zealander, and reject Pākehā, you know, or just say, I'm Kiwi, or whatever, in ways that could sometimes be exclusionary as well. I think by saying I'm a Pākehā New Zealander, I'm implicitly saying there are other kinds of New Zealanders. I'm qualifying what kind of New Zealander I am. So there's Māori ones, there's Samoan ones, there's Chinese, there's Indian, etc., etc. So what is it? And I don't know, so I think that's that.
How does Tangata Tiriti fit into a new constitution when New Zealand becomes a republic?
Bloody hell. Honestly, I would not have a clue. I think the whole thing about us becoming a republic, people keep saying, yeah, we're going to do it, in my lifetime, it's going to happen, but we're not doing it now. And I think one of the reasons why nobody ever wants to do it now is because of te tiriti, and like, what are we going to do about that? Because once we start having a constitution, we're going to have to put the te tiriti at the base of it. And then what does that mean, and how is that going to be put into practice? Because it is the basis of our constitution, because the state that we have only exists because that agreement was signed. That's what it was all about, wasn't it? So that Hobson wanted, not he wanted personally to become the governor of this place, but he was sent to get Māori agreement to that precise thing happening, to there being a colonial government set up here to, to work alongside Māori and to take control of the problematic Europeans who were living here without anybody to police their behaviours and any laws for them to be living under. So how does Tangata Tiriti? So if we are starting from te tiriti, whatever our new constitution would be, it would need to somehow reflect the fact that there are two sides to the society that follows from that agreement made in 1840. There's the Māori side and there's the Tangata Tiriti side. How that looks, what shape our political system would take, I have no idea. That's not my job. And it would take a lot of talk and so on. But I hope that is that.
So let's rewind back from being a republic. And this question says, if we flipped a switch tomorrow and the conditions of the treaty were met, could it actually work?
Wow. I reckon. One of the things, that's a good answer, eh?
Yeah, I reckon. Yeah, nah.
At the end of the book, I asked people about their visions for the future, or like somewhere in their interviews I asked them that. And when they talked about imagining a world where tēnā rangatiratanga was in place, they talked about what they saw as the values and the benefits of living in a place where Māori authority had kind of full expression. And one of the things that they really emphasised a lot was, okay, iwi might be doing corporate things and so on because with their treaty settlements and so on, but even if Māori are being corporate, they have a different value base than just than Elon Musk, say. So there's a sustainability underpinning and ethic for the long term. They're concerned about they're not going to leave, and they want a society that's going to work for their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren and so on. So that says something about values and also environmental values, human values and also environmental values. So I'm not, I think it could work. I think it could work. I don't see why it shouldn't work, honestly. And I think it would be an exciting and better society.
What would honouring he whakaputanga look like for unaware Pākehā?
Cool, blimey.
Yeah, good ones, eh?
Just trying to remind myself. He whakaputanga said, well, it's, I don't know. For unaware Pākehā. Because he whakaputanga was by signing up and agreeing to that, it was basically the recognition of Māori sovereignty by the British Crown, as far as I understand it. 4 articles. The assertion of Māori sovereignty, the reassertion of Māori sovereignty, and the statement that any other authority, a kāwana, that was ever set up would be under that authority. What else?
And that it would be gazetted.
They would meet. They would meet and make laws annually, and the request for King William at the time to be their guide and mentor, basically their mātua, right, of their infant state, because it was a new enterprise that Māori were embarking on, trying to create a political structure that was higher than hapu, effectively, and higher than iwi, to create unity across iwi and hapu, so that they could work together and debate and come to decisions about how to best cope with this new world they found themselves in with these people who suddenly turned up uninvited. But I don't know how to answer that question, honestly. What would it look like? I don't know that it would look that different from honouring Te Tiriti, because I think it basically is the template on which Te Tiriti was. I think you guys might be better to answer this than me. It's not your question, Ngaire, is it? Otherwise I'd have to have words with you later, it's a hard one.
And the fact that you
Anybody want to chip in?
Yeah. Perhaps after the last one, you used unity in that response, so I'm going to choose this as the last question that we'll pose to you for now. Diversification in unity is a great term. What would our society look like if it was embraced in Aotearoa nirvana?
Oh, yeah, it'd be great, wouldn't it? What would our society look like? I think it would be more equal, to use that term, again, which is getting a bit debased, but really, like the many differences, and of course there's many differences, right? Not just our ethnic differences and our differences between who's Indigenous and who's not Indigenous. There's the differences of, ability and health and whatever. I do think if we could learn to value difference in a really genuine, thoroughgoing way, I think we would have a more equal society and probably a lot happier and much stronger kind of community. But hey, it's a hard question. Do you want to say something to it? No.
Bless you, Avril. No. People, thank you for those questions, and I'm sorry we didn't get through every single one because there were so many, but I hope you enjoyed the challenge that you posed to Avril and
watching me sweat.
And her responses. Thank you. I'm glad that you didn't stay in your rooms to be safe.
Oh, yeah.
I would like now to hand back to Ngaire, who will then pass on to Tim to close us with karakia, or we just said beautiful. Thank you, Ngaire.
Thank you, Sheryl.
Can I just say one? Just want to say, oh yeah, I can say thank you without the thingy on. Yeah, just want to thank you all, for coming and again, and for those fabulous questions. I'm sorry that we couldn't really do full justice to all of them, but I do love when people pose these difficult, thoughtful questions. So they're a gift in themselves, the questions, and everybody will be thinking about the answers, won't they? Yeah. So that's good.
Well, kia ora everybody. Thank you again to Avril and to Sheryl. I'm going to come back to giving you a proper thank you, but just to do a bit of a wrap up from Network Waitangi Whangārei. Just a few sort of wanted to remind people that this is the first of four. So actually next week I'm going to be talking about my, glad I'm coming after Avril. I'm going to be talking about my PhD, which looked at the experiences of Pākehā who worked in the health system, particularly how they championed te tiriti and anti-racism during the period of the recent reforms. And I'm also very glad that Avril's book came out after I'd finished writing my PhD, because there are so many similarities. But some subtle differences as well. So I'm going to talk about that next week with a particular kind of frame about thinking more about Pākehā who working in institutions, how we can support and change and lead change. So that's my kōrero. And then the week after we've got Paul Barlow, who's going to be talking about how to, what does te tiriti mean to a middle class white guy like him, which we think should be quite revealing. And then the last speaker, which is on the, so Paul, I'm on the 31st, Paul's on the 7th, and then Max Harris is coming on the 14th. And Max is a lawyer, constitutional, has a lot of experience in constitutional law, is involved with Action Station, and he's going to be talking about the Treaty Principles Bill and what we can do to mobilise and inform ourselves about that, which is great timing because the Treaty Principles Bill is going to be introduced into Parliament on the 19th of November. So that's what's upcoming. Thanks to Les and Claire for all the work on, supporting the merchandise out there. There's Ngāpuhi Speaks is there, and books and lots of things that you can do to support te tiriti. Big thanks to Yetta, who's been pretty much did the bulk of all the organising, and we've just kind of come in behind her. So big mihi to you, Yetta. Neil from Hammerhead, who's actually doing this is awesome, eh? Like, it's very professional, looks very cool. So thank you so much, Neil, for professionally recording this event. And you remember to please tell other people that these will be available on our newly developed website, which is networkwaitangiwhangārei.org.nz, and you can get information about the treaty workshops that we do, and you can get information on our State of the Pākehā Nation. So every year since 2009, we've been running State of the Pākehā Nation, and there's a book of essays they're all dedicated to Joan Cook, who, as I mentioned earlier, was one of our founding members. One of the things that came up in the questions today was about how do we implement Te Tiriti, and particularly how do we implement Te Tiriti within organisations. And we do run implementation workshops, and we are developing a bespoke workshops for organisations that are interested in thinking really deeply about how to implement Te Tiriti in their workplace. So all of that kind of information is on the website, and so just to direct you to that. And I think those are the things I was supposed to tell you about. And just, I get to give the cool gifts. So firstly to you, Sheryl. This was the book that she was talking about, Ngāpuhi Speaks, but I really hope that you don't have a copy, because you now have one. Thank you. You did a great job, mate. Thanks. Good. Thank you, and we'll have you back. And just a little taonga for you, Avril. This is a book by Maya Hitaraka, who is local. Hitaraka whānau, very well known here in Whangārei, and this is her book about inheriting the sacred jawbone Indigenous knowledge holders, reimagining education, and
kia ora.
We're very proud of this. And
How beautiful.
so thank you so much, Avril. You were fabulous, and perfect way to start off our series. And
It's been a privilege, I tell you. So, yeah, thank you.
And that's it from me, and I'm going to hand over to Tim, and he's going to officially, bring us to a close. But tea, coffee, and the food, amazingly made by our members, Jodie from out at Nungaru, and Aka, and others. So, if you're interested in joining Network Waitangi, there's a job for everybody. Kia ora.
Kia ora, kia ora Ngaire, kia ora koutou katoa, kia ora ki a koe, kia korua hoki, tēnā te mihi atu kia korua. As we started with the karakia, let's finish with it, and remembering the bit of the discussion we've had around this. And do this in the spirit of honouring tangata whenua in this area, and acknowledging our part in solidarity alongside them. The karakia I'll use is one about solidarity, and I think that's part of the spirit of this evening, both of unity amongst ourselves and solidarity with Māori, and that it be in this time and place between Rangi and Papa, that would be this time and place that we have that solidarity in relationship, and that this solidarity may be for the purpose of growing our enlightenment, sharing and learning and growing together with an enlightenment that is robust and full. So whakamaua te kōrero, whakamaua te wānanga, whakamaua kia rangi nui e tui ho nei, whakamaua kia papatua noku, takoto ake nei, whakatina ki te tumu te maramatanga, whakatina kia tēnā, hui e, homi e, tai ki e, let's do it together. Kia ora mai tātou. Kia ora.
Just wondering, what brought you out here tonight?
I think solidarity and being on that journey of understanding Te Tiriti, and just seeing what I can do to be part of the solution.
And what did you get from being here tonight, I think?
Well, I think the energy in the room, there was that beautiful story, lots of really beautiful stories about kindness and justice and being alongside, and something beautiful can happen here. and we get glimpses of it. So that's one of the most beautiful things I wrote, is that, some cool stuff is happening, get with the program kind of thing.
Thank you very much. Thanks for coming. What brought you out here tonight?
I think Tony said it to me, just wanting to get a sense of people who feel the same way as us, because a lot of the time...
be around some people that are similar thoughts, because out in the world it feels pretty...
Sometimes you feel like you're coming up against it all the time. And so I thought it'd be nice to feel some unity and solidarity with people.
And what's the one biggest thing that you'd say that you're taking away from tonight?
I think I'm quite encouraged that there's so many people, not just my age but older here. And I think the younger generation, they kind of get it. And a lot of times it's my age and up that don't maybe get it. But so I'm encouraged to see that the people here...
It's great to see the older generation.
Just interested to know what brought you out here tonight.
Oh, well, you mean apart from the advertisement? I saw the advertisement and I thought that looks like me, and I'm coming to keep myself up to date with what's happening in the world of Te Tiriti. But also it's been a lifelong interest of mine, and since I've retired I'm able to go back and re-immerse myself in some of those interests. So that's effectively what I'm doing here.
And I don't think that this is why I came, because I think I would have come anyway, but I do think it's very timely. I do think, like seeing that advertisement, there's a spur to come to say there are other discourses going on, and it would be good to just make this one strong.
And what do you think you got from being here tonight? If you could say, what's the one, mention one big thing that you feel was, that you'll take away?
What would be my takeaway?
Well, I'd say a number of conversations that I've had with people since we started talking that have been reflective, and I shall go away and think about it.
I don't know what to say. My takeaway really is really just being the pleasure of being immersed in a group. A large number of people were here tonight who are clearly interested and in support of changes happening in our society towards Te Tiriti, not necessarily changing the treaty. That's not where I'm heading. So that would be what I've enjoyed.
So what brought you out here tonight?
My partner Sierra is a longtime friend of Avril and her family, but we're also obviously very interested in the subject matter. I'm from the States, so I don't know anything, so it's been very enlightening. Yeah.
And what would you say is maybe the one big thing, or anything particular that you've taken away from tonight that's really resonated?
Just how much people care about each other here, I feel like, is a pretty good one, and how people are really trying to mend, I feel like, some hard feelings and stuff like that. Yeah.